G'day, folks. What I thought I'd share with you today is a team where it's purely designed in each position to make as much cash generation as possible for the 2023 season. And what I've done, I've capped the, highest price possible at 350k. So, really, it's just a pure value at every position. Look, if you wanted to do, you could basically eliminate players from this and just plug in premiums, and then look, you've pretty well got your team. So, either premiums or underpriced premiums. But yeah, basically, I've got here the rookies that I think will be scoring well, but also have that balance of good job security. And those that are not going to be playing round one, I've ultimately eliminated for the purposes of this exercise. There's some that may be in doubt, maybe a Wagner perhaps, but yeah, look, each of these players I think are at least chances for round one, and if so, should definitely be on your radar as consideration. So, in defense, I actually really like this group, and so much so that probably the bulk of these players will be in my final team. So I'll probably be going quite cheap in my final Supercoach team this year, just because I think there's an incredible amount of value in defense. And you can even see with a few of the names that have ended up pushing through the midfield, or even in the case of Francis up forwards. So I'll be able to get away with a very cheap defense, and Yo may well be my D1. So watch for that as, I guess, something a bit unique for my team this year, perhaps. But yeah, look, with Yo, the expectation is that he's going to play through the midfield. So if that's the case, and if he's named round one, well, he's going to be in my team, and he's going to make you a lot of money, I'd be expecting, if he's in good shape. Hunter Clark, same story. Sounds like he's going to be playing as a midfielder this year. So with that being the case, yeah, look, he's someone I'm very comfortable adding to my team, because look, in the context of St Kilda's midfield, it's a very vanilla midfield that needs that little bit of spark. And as a junior, Clark could absolutely rack it up as well. So having that capacity to accumulate like a machine, but then also bringing that little bit of speed and a little bit of class to the Saints midfield, I think that'll work a treat for them, assuming at least that he can remain healthy. And it's a bit the same with Yo, really. But yeah, if you're willing to make that risk, and look, if you've got this many trades this year, well, I think there's really that scope to take those chances and bet on players that you've got high confidence in, as I do with Yo and Clark, assuming they can remain healthy. And a Jack Bowes, look, is really, really underpriced, it's fair to say. So, look, as long as he's playing round one, and I don't care where he's playing, he can be a mid, he can be a back, he can be a forward. He can play anywhere, so yeah, look, wherever he fits into Geelong's team, as long as he's a clear best 22 player for them, or deemed so coming into the year, again, I'd be really happy to have him in my team, and he's going to make you quite a good amount of money based on his upside, wherever he's playing again, for that matter. Caulfield, it's all about injuries. If he's healthy, he can score. So he can intercept, he can rebound. So very, very underpriced, and could be one of the bargains for the year if he can stay healthy and retain his spot in the best 22 as well, will be the key. Because there is that level of uncertainty with a pretty even group in St Kilda's defence, I would say, other than one or two stars. Marchbank, same story. It's all been about injuries over the years, but look, if he's healthy and playing round one, well, he's got the scope to score as that really good interceptor. So, yeah, look, given that, I think, again, assuming he's going to be healthy this year, which isn't a guarantee in his case, well, he's going to make you money. Connor McKenna, absolute bargain at this price. The key to look for is he's playing round one, and you want him running out of defence. So if he's lined up across half forward, I'm not sure he's going to retain his spot. But if he's generating drive across half back, well, he's got the speed, he's got the skills. So he's really going to do a lot of damage across half back if Brisbane do incorporate him in that role and make him a best 22 piece, or include him in that best 22. So yeah, he's one I'm pretty keen to start with. And then you've got Josh Weddle, who over the off-season has really continued his development, and he's one where he's a bit of a later bloomer. So my only knock of him coming into the draft was that he just can't kick at all, but he's on the right team to learn how to kick, because Hawthorn just have a way with anyone they draft of developing their kicking ability. So with a Weddle, he can intercept. He creates a lot of drive through his run, which makes him a bit unique for that sort of 190 plus defender. But yeah, great interceptor, wins his one-on-ones, and he can rack up the footy as well. So He's one I'd certainly have on my watch list, and it'll be interesting to see with Hawthorn whether they utilise him as a mid or as a defender, because certainly last year he was a defender, but the reports are that he can play a bit of both. I haven't seen him personally playing through the midfield, but the reports are really positive that he can go through there, which makes him a really intriguing prospect and one that I'll certainly be considering at his price point for my bench. And then you've got Darcy Wilmot. So it'll be interesting to see, can both he and McKenna fit into Brisbane's best 22? That's a bit of an unknown. But I'd say based on Wilmot's end to last year that he would be well and truly in that mix. So yeah, we'll have to see. But if he is named round one, I'll probably be starting him on my bench. And again, he'll make quite a good amount of money if he holds his spot. In the mids, and again, and this is pretty consistent across most positions, but there's quite a lot of mid-priced value this year. Jacob Hopper is an absolute contested beast. So if he can manage 300 contested possessions in a season, look, he's someone where if you're getting him at this price point, he's going to absolutely go very, very nicely in Richmond's midfield and as a Supercoach prospect. So yeah, he'd be one of my first picked midfielders from that cash generation perspective, and is certainly of the mid-price as my preference, and the one I'd say, look, if you're going to have a mid-pricer, put Hopper in. Sheed, underpriced. Look, West Coast midfield is pretty dreadful, so assuming you've got a healthy Sheed, he should play a pretty prominent role. So yeah, I think he's going to make a good amount of cash, but he's probably realistically for my final team, and a team that actually includes premiums and underpriced premiums, is probably not going to make it. But certainly justifiable, and again, he should make you quite a good amount of money. James Worpel, I actually really like him, and with you've got the likes of Tom Mitchell and Jager O'Meara leaving Hawthorn, I think that really opens the window for Worpel to play quite a substantial midfield role for Hawthorn. So given that, look, he could get back to scoring maybe 90. So I think there's quite a lot of upside, and probably second to Hopper, I would say of the mid-prices, Worpel is that next best bet. So yeah, certainly watch out for him as someone to consider for your Supercoach this year, particularly if you want a second mid-pricer and he just sort of fits that salary cap. I'd be pretty comfortable having him. Jai Cully, look, he's a late bloomer, and with that, there's substantial scope to develop. And hearing the preseason reports about how his running has really improved, I think there's real scope for him to play regular midfield minutes for West Coast, particularly again with that weakness of West Coast's midfield and their need to really go in a youthful direction, given really they're one of those bottom teams and they don't really have much in the way of good youth. So they really need to push someone like a Cully into that midfield and really give him those shots. And I'm sure he'd rotate forward as well, given he has those forward of centre capabilities too. So I'd be looking for that sort of dual position, but probably mostly mid would be how I'd be looking to utilise him. Will Ashcroft, if he's not in your team, get him in. He can average over 90 this year. It just all depends on how much of the midfield time is he going to play. But look, for me personally, after you've got Neil, you've got Dunkley, they're the big two Brisbane midfielders. I would say Ashcroft has the scope to be that third midfielder in that rotation and the third most prominent minutes getter through there. Jared Lyons, look, if he's healthy, he can contend for that third midfield spot, but people have no idea how good Ashcroft is. He's someone who, look, he's going to play like someone who's been in the competition for 3 to 4 years. So he's got that burst, he's got the first possession winning. So big time asset and big time weapon through Brisbane's midfield, and will be the best first year player beyond doubt if he's healthy and used properly through the midfield. So that's one thing to certainly lock in with Ashcroft. He will not disappoint. With him, Mackenzie, look, again, Hawthorn's midfield is weak. That gives him an opportunity to appear pretty soon. So he was actually that 1-2 punch with Ashcroft last year through that midfield. So whether it's in the NAB League or whether it's for Vic Metro in the under-18 champs. But yeah, look, with a Mackenzie, he's ready to go and able to play early season, maybe even round one. So consider him for your team. He might be someone I'd consider for my bench. And look, you could even consider him for a field spot plausibly, but for me, probably more of a bench money maker would be my thinking at this stage. Jack Bytel, we'll have to see if he's considered best 22. But if he does get games, then given how much of a contested beast and strong tackler he is, look, I would certainly be giving him strong consideration for my team. But we'll have to see if it looks likely that he'll be part of that best 22 rather than just on that fringe. They're the things that'll matter in that assessment. Will Phillips, I think he'll be a regular best 22 mid for North Melbourne this year, and if they're really going to push in the youth direction, he's one they really need to introduce as a regular midfielder, because that's what he does. And he was someone where, look, season 1 he was ready to go, but unfortunately his first 2 years he has had his injuries that have held him back from really being the player that he should. So put him in your team, assuming he's listed round 1, and you could consider him for a field spot. But if not, I'd be very comfortable with him as like a first emergency or something like that. Josh Goda, we'll have to see if his best 22 for North Melbourne. Their defence is pretty shocking, so that gives him a real chance. And look, he's someone where he improved pretty well over the second half of last year, which really gives him a shot to earn pretty regular opportunities this year, if not possibly even round 1 selection. Ruben Ginbey, another of those later developers, and again, a later developer who has rapidly continued that improvement over the preseason, so much so that it's likely he'll play round 1 and probably through West Coast midfield. So give him some consideration. And that's one thing that in really assessing, and I haven't taken that much notice of what's been happening in the preseason, but what's really popping out to me is the improvement of all these late bloomers. When you've got the likes of a Jai Cully, a Josh Weddle, a Ruben Ginbey, where they're all taking those really rapid steps forward, and they're guys where in the lead up to them being drafted, they've really sort of grown, they've improved an absolute stack as footballers. Well, they're those upside signs. You don't just look for, oh, this guy's a freak athlete or they can do something that no one else can. It's really looking at that really sharp trajectory, and if they're actually growing, so if they're getting taller as well on top of that in that draft year, well, that shows that there's quite likely to be quite a bit of untapped upside. So look, if I was continuing to evaluate drafts going forward, I would give much greater weighting towards that type of footballer because, I'm going to bet in future years you're going to get more of these sort of Ginbeys, your Weddles, your Cullys, where they've grown that bit later, improved that bit later, and really had that rapid upward trajectory, which really tells me that there's great scope in these types and that you can really get them for under what should be their value. And you can look at someone like a Ginbey where it's like, well, he wasn't necessarily on quality a top 20 player from his draft, but because of that really sharp upward trajectory, he can improve way beyond that in a hurry. And that's what I'm suspecting he will prove this year. And you've got a Corey Wagner as well. So recycled player, but he played good footy in the VFL. And look, I give him a chance to earn best 22 selection, most likely across halfback for Fremantle. And possibly could push across a wing as well. But look, here's one I would be definitely looking at as a possible inclusion. Of course, we have to see with the injury how long it takes him to get his hamstring right. But assuming he gets that right and is named round 1, I'd be probably starting him in my team, be it whether it's in defence or through the midfield. It doesn't really matter. Of the rucks, look, the one I'm probably going to have realistically as my bench rookie will be Radigolia. But it's just because he's the one out of these who's likely to play. So, a Ned Moyle, look, through the ruck, if you've got Jared Witts as that number 1 ruck, it's going to be hard for him to get opportunities. But if Witts does go down, I'd be very keen to get Moyle in a hurry. He's ready to go, playing fantastic footy in the VFL, and another who has that really rapid improvement trajectory. So be aware of his name, folks, because one day he's going to be a number 1 ruckman for a team. And if he stays with Gold Coast, well, whenever Witts retires, I think Moyle will be that man. And I don't think they'll need to actually bring in a big name to replace Witts, which is a great situation for the Suns to be in ultimately. And you've got a Liam Reedy. So here's a mature age selection who, Look, with Fremantle, again, it's going to be hard for him to get games ultimately. Where if you've got the likes of Darcy, you've got Jackson as those two rucks, well, Reedy doesn't get a game when that's the case. But look, let's say a Darcy goes down with injury and his season is done. Well, maybe that means that Reedy can come in. So if that's the case, that's the sort of situation I'd be looking at him. And again, you've got two genuine rucks here. Whereas you've got a Radigolia where, look, I think as a key defender, that's more what you'd be looking at with him. Where, look, I was saying over the off-season, he'd be a great target for a team that needs a key defender because he's got such strong hands overhead. Great athlete, really strong, but absolutely absorbs those marks overhead. So with those capabilities, look, I think defense will be a spot, and I think he could become best 22 this year. So that's why, again, I'm probably looking at him for that bench spot, given none of the other cheap rucks really sort of have that likelihood of being a regular. As for the forwards, so Horn Francis, so sounds like he'll be a midfielder for Port Adelaide, so give him strong consideration. His leg is what held him up last year, and if not for that, I suspect he probably would have been averaging around 90, realistically. So big time contested ball winner, strong tackler, can go forward, kick his goals, take some strong marks, come up clutch in the big moments. So I think he will really be an important player for Port Adelaide this season and going forward. And when he's at his best as well, what people don't realise is that his pressure and work defensively is as good as I've seen. And he's not going to be a defensive midfielder. He'll be there to win the footy, just generate that sort of drive through the midfield, really sort of push out there with his legs. But at the same time, he will commit defensively and really have an impact. So I'm expecting a big impact from Horn Francis this year and a big improvement. So watch out for him and don't dismiss him based on what you thought you saw in season 1, because he's a much better footballer than that. What he was doing in the SANFL the year before he got drafted, he was the best in all the state leagues across the country, bar none, in terms of how he was impacting games by the end of the season at least. So yeah, watch out because he's going to be a player, folks. Wayne Malira sounds like he's healthy, and if he's a cross halfback generating drive, which is what it sounds like, well, he can increase in price. Not necessarily my preferred to some of the options here, but look, someone certainly to give consideration to if you're looking for someone in this price range and you don't want to sort of go with someone who may or may not break out, as you could say with a Horn Francis or a Perkins or a Flanders. So yeah, consider Malira. I don't mind him. And then you've got an Archie Perkins. So he was someone where I was watching him closely during last preseason and watching him through the midfield, big step up. It looked like he was going to have a breakout season, but didn't happen, didn't really get those regular midfield opportunities. But looks like this year, I think he probably will become that regular midfielder. So if that's the case, his upside is high. So he could be scoring, as with a Horn Francis, maybe around that sort of 90 mark potentially. I wouldn't dismiss that for a minute. So substantial scoring upside there, and should be able to make you money, assuming he is going to be that mostly midfielder this year. Look, he'll play forward, and I'll say the same of Horn Francis as well. They should both get their forward minutes. They both have those capabilities, but I would be saying look at them mostly to play through the midfield, because that's where they're going to have their most consistent impacts on games. You've got a Sam Flanders. So for those who watched him in the VFL at the end of last year, he was phenomenal, folks. Phenomenal. He had, I think it was 2 games where he had 40 or more disposals through the finals. And the role I'd be looking for is a regular midfield role. He can play forward and is fine as a forward, but his best position is as a midfielder. So I'd be looking at him to be predominantly as a midfielder, but then also have his rest periods up forward. I think that's the best way to use Flanders, and I really hope that the Suns really, I guess, have that vision towards him, because otherwise they're wasting his talent, and a team with the savvy to be watching the Suns and their playing list across both AFL and VFL, they should be able to pick up pretty quick that Flanders is AFL material and he's ready to go into a midfield and rack it up and have an impact. So yeah, he's certainly someone where I'd be saying watch him, and look, he could average 100 if he's playing as a permanent midfielder this year. So Flanders absolutely needs to be on your watch list if he isn't already. Josh Carmichael, look, he's probably not going to be in my team just because there is the sub risk and the question of is he going to be a regular best 22 player. So I did talk to Supercoach DR, and Carmichael wasn't a player I mentioned in that, and it was mostly because I'm just not sure if he's regular best 22. You've got a Tom Mitchell coming in. You've got a Nick Dacos who probably plays through the midfield this year. And if you've added a Joe Richards, if you've got an Oleg Markov who just signed with Collingwood as well, that's a sign that Dacos is moving into the midfield. So, look, I think Carmichael's going to continue his sharp upward trajectory and improvement, which will make it really hard for the likes of, say, a Jack McRae for Collingwood to become a regular best 22 piece. But, look, if Carmichael does become a regular best 22 piece and plays mostly through the midfield, he'll probably play a bit forward too, but mostly as a midfielder, there is the scope for him to score quite well. So, look, consider him to that extent, but is he going to be in my team? Look, I'm not considering him that seriously. But be aware of him if, say, he plays a couple of big games and is as a mid. That's the sort of situation where I'd say, look at Carmichael then, to give you that sort of feel. Aaron Francis, he's a really talented defender. What's been really frustrating for me to watch with him at Essendon has been, there's been that lack of continuity. They've had him back, they've pushed him forward, put him back. They're just not giving him that regular role that he needs. So Francis at his best, he's an intercept marking beast and he's a really good kick. So he's someone that really, for me, I think becomes a role player for Sydney, and I think he'll probably keep someone like a Will Gould out of Sydney's best 22, even if Gould does make those incremental improvements. I think there's scope for Francis to get that regular role. So if he does, he's probably in my team, but yeah, no stress if he isn't. But yeah, if he's playing in defence and intercepting and rebounding quite a bit, well, there's scope for him to score well. And he's that almost key position type where he does give you those options to play, whether it's medium tall or he can play key position as needed. He's more that sort of third tall, if you like, for those who haven't seen much of him. But yeah, look, with that change of scenery, new opportunity, I think it really gives him that scope to become a best 22 piece, which with Essendon, look, others were really being discovered and really taking some steps, and it became really hard for him to get that role in Essendon's defence, as you've had the likes of whether it's a Ridley, a Redmond, those types really emerge and become very good and play the sort of roles that Francis would be suited to. That's really been the issue there. McLean, look, I don't think he's going to be a midfielder this year for the Bulldogs, but I'll probably nonetheless have him in my team. So with a Dunkley leaving, that does open up midfield minutes, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at the quality of the individuals that the Dogs have available to put through their midfield, it's hard to justify McLean playing those midfield minutes. So I think he'll be mostly a forward who maybe gets some spot minutes here and there through the midfield. But yeah, look at that price point. He's good value nonetheless. So yeah, he's probably going to be someone I'll have in my team. And then you've got a Joe Richards. So he's an absolute running machine, and I think he's got a good chance to be a best 22 player for Collingwood this year. So yeah, look, do watch closely for him, because I think there's those chances for him to really replace Dacos in defence. I think he's probably, if Dacos moves into the midfield, I think Richards is that most likely direct replacement, just to replace the meaningful drive that Dacos was generating last year. Thanks for watching, folks, and if you've got any questions around any of the, whether it's cheapies, the mid prices, ask away, because ultimately every player across every list, I'm well aware of everything they've accomplished over the last certainly 12 months and even preceding that. So if you need score projections on a particular player, whether it's for Supercoach, whether it's AFL Fantasy, again, give me a yell. I'm probably the best person to help out with any of that, given I'm across not only the juniors, but state leagues and AFL as well. But yeah, look, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future updates. And in my next video, I'll do an actual Supercoach team reveal. So yeah, get behind me and look forward to joining you then.